Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Ayana. I'll be your facilitator today, and this is the YHUHderek channel. And we will be doing part 4 of examining the moon today, and it should be considered a part of the Understanding Genesis Chapter 1 series. Before we get started, as always, I want to give my deep appreciation for everyone who has watched the channel, the YHUHderek channel, everyone who has supported the channel, corresponded, interacted with me on the channel. And I want to say to please consider giving a donation if you get good information, good research from this channel. To please consider donating and helping support the channel. We have 2 avenues to do that. The first one is PayPal, and you can find our PayPal account under YHUHderek@mail.com. Also through CashApp, and that will be $YHUHderek. And thank you again for your support. So we are on part 4. So under part 4, we will be looking at Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. And we'll also be looking at scripture references that's outside of the canonical scripture book that talk about the moon and see if it should be followed for feast in Yahuwah's calendar. So let's get started. So this section, part 4, is Yahuwah's purpose for the moon. Here is a quote where Yahuwah is talking about not worshiping anything. It's from Deuteronomy 17, verses 2 through 5. If there be found among you within any of the gates which Yahuwah your Elohim have given you, man or woman, which have brought wickedness in the sight of Yahuwah your Elohim in transgressing his covenant, and have gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have not commanded, and it be told to you, and you have heard of it, and inquired diligently, and find it to be true, and the thing be certain, that such an abomination be done in Yasrael, then you shall bring forth that man or woman which have committed that wicked thing to the gates that same man and woman, and shall stone them with stones until they die. So that shows the severity of how Yahweh feels about worshiping the sun, the moon, or the stars, meaning the constellations, meaning the zodiac. He feels very strongly about that. I showed 2 other previous scripture quotes in parts 2 and 3, and this is the 3rd one. All right, so what you're looking at is Genesis or Bereshith, chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. And I wanted to go through because whenever you talk about this section, which is the 4th day of creation, whenever you talk about this section, and in particular, people who advocate for the moon and moon observance and the lunar calendar, they make reference to these, and in particular, to one portion of these scriptures. So why don't we just read through it and we'll talk about it a little bit more. And Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the sign of the stars. And Elohim set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And the existing evening and that existing morning were the 4th day. All right, so as you look at these verses, you'll notice that twice in the orange, Yahuwah tells us the purpose of creating the sun and the moon and the stars, and that's to divide the day from the night. And the second orange one at the bottom here is to divide the light from the darkness. So twice Yahweh says this in this series of scriptures. 3 times Yahuwah tells us where the lights are located. The lights in the firmament of heaven, lights in the firmament of heaven, and this is in the green, lights in the firmament of heaven. So 3 times in these scriptures, Yahuwah tells us that these lights are in the firmament, which we call the sky, of heaven. Twice he tells us that he made these lights to divide the light from the darkness. 4 times in the yellow, he tells us the purpose for the sun and the moon and the stars, right? So to give light upon the earth, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and the night. And despite the fact that Yahuwah has repeated these same 3 things, everybody is hung up on the second half of the 14th scripture, which is here in red. Signs and seasons and for days and years. So when you look over the whole embodiment of the 4th day, Yahuwah tells us several times what it's meant for. He tells us several times where he placed it. And he tells us what the purpose was behind inventing it. He tells us that twice in orange. He tells us 4 times in yellow what they're meant to do, what the job is for the sun and the moon to do. But everyone gets hung up on the smallest part of this group of scriptures. And I wanted to point that out because the answer is literally in your face. What Yahuwah created the sun and the moon and the stars for. It's literally here and it's repeated over and over again. Yet, we are stuck on signs and seasons and days and years. So why don't we look at that? All right, so signs, seasons, days, and years. We're going to look at signs, right? We're going to take it right in order. So Isaiah 13:10. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. So this is a sign of Yahuwah coming back. This is a sign. You'll see this repeated several times in scripture, which I have 3 examples here. That is a sign of Yahuwah coming back, of judgment coming, of judgment upon the earth and the people in the earth, right? Luke 21:25, and this is Yahusha talking. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars and on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity. The sea and the waves were roaring. All right. Revelations 8:12. And the 4th angel sounded, and the 3rd part of the sun was smitten, and the 3rd part of the moon, and the 3rd part of the stars, so as the 3rd part of them was darkened, and the day shined not for the 3rd part, and night likewise. All right, so we see here that the signs that Yahweh, the lights that Yahweh puts in the firmament, as stipulated in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. These will be signs of calamity to come, signs of Yahweh, Yahusha coming back to judge the earth, signs of just bad signs. These are not good, okay? These are not good. And in certain aspects, it says that even the righteous will tremble. So these are not good for anyone, if you're righteous or even if you're not. These are not good signs, and they're fearful signs, right? So what's the meaning of a sign according to scripture? Well, a sign is the word auth, right? H225, 226. A sign of something in a specific time for the future, past as in a memorial or a military ensign, can also be used as a token for an unseen thing, for example, some sort of prophecy. So, back in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, let them be for signs. So these are example of signs, right? Of things to come, of calamity, of judgment. Next, we're going to talk about seasons, and this is probably the most important one out of signs, seasons, days, and years. Signs, days, and years seems to be self-explanatory, but seasons seems to be a stumbling block, right? Seasons mean appointed times. I mentioned this in part 2, and I also mentioned this extensively in part 3. What proponents of moon observance say is that signs, which is the word mu'aid or mo'ed if you use vowel pointing, they say that the word seasons, which is in the KJV, that's what it's mu'aid is translated to in English. They say that that's specifically for feasts, that appointed times are specifically for feasts. Now, that's not true, and I have examples here at the bottom, but let's go through Numbers 9, 1 through 5. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they came out of the land of Egypt, saying, let the children of Yasharel also keep the Pesach at his appointed season. In the 14th day of this month at evening, you shall keep it in his appointed season, according to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof, and you shall keep it. And Moshe spoke to the children of Yasharel, and that they should keep the Pesach. And they kept the Pesach on the 14th day of the first month at evening, in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all Yahuwah commanded Moshe, so did the children of Yasharel. So in the yellow, we have appointed season twice. This is specifically a set time that Yahuwah stipulated. What is that set time? The 14th day of the first month of the year, right? In the first month is underlined, and then also in the 14th day of this month. So it's there. Moshe is telling Yasharel in the first month of the year. This portion of time is what Yahuwah has said. There is no mention of the moon in this feast. There's no mention of the moon in any feast. And I want you to take a look at that, right? So again, the YHUHderek word, otherwise know YHUHderek as Hebrew. In the YHUHderek word for season is mu'aid, H4150, and it means a set time, a point in time. The root word to mu'aid is aid, H5703, perpetuity of time, eternity. So in the flow of time, which is perpetual, which is forever, which is an eternity, and nobody can understand how long that is, there is a set time within the flow of eternity. Yahuwah is saying that his feasts are at a certain appointed time within the year. Appointed time does not mean feast. We are talking about feast in this verse right here, but it's an appointed time. It's not the feast itself. It is a certain time of the year where you have to celebrate the specific feast that Yahweh tells you. He tells you what day it starts, how many days the feast are to continue, and then he tells you which days are Shabbats, which are set aside for no work and just observance, right? So in red here, a mu'aid / season in English has absolutely nothing to do with the approach of the moon or any of its phases. And if you recall, we talked about in part 2, we talked about how, moon observance is either the full moon or the new moon. And none of the seasons have anything to do with that, and you can't find it in scripture. What has been done is a bunch of manipulations to point you towards moon observance. There is no moon observance when it comes to Yahuwah's feast. All right? Mu'aid is dealing with a certain point in time in the eternity of time. And I would like you to look at these verses here, Exodus chapter 12, verse 14 and 17 and 24. Also, chapter 13 and 10, Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 6, and Leviticus chapter 23, 4. Please take a look at those. All right. So now we're going to go on to days, right? We're going to talk about days. And again, I just did a video, what is morning and what is evening. We talked about the parameter of the days. Please go and check that out to get more clarification. But let's start with Job 3:6. As for that night, let darkness seize upon it. Let it not be joined to the days of the year. Let it not come unto the number of months. So Job is pretty much, he's talking about himself as he's sitting, in torment and is upset about what happened to him. And he's talking about, let the darkness not be joined to days. All right. Proverbs 37, 18 and 19. Yahuwah knows the days of the upright, or Yashar, right? Upright means Yashar. And their inheritance shall be forever. They shall not be ashamed in the evil time, and in the days of famine they shall be satisfied. So Yahweh is or Proverbs is talking about days in two forms. The days meaning the lifespan of the upright, and also days as in 12-hour days of famine. All right. Daniel 7:9. I beheld till the thorns were cast down. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was as white as snow, and the hair on his head like pure wool. His throne was like fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. So the Ancient of Days, here it's referencing all days that were ever created, from the beginning of creation, which is in Genesis chapter 1, till the end of time and past that, right? So in all these instances, all these three verses, it's talking about a day. What is a day? Well, day, which is in Yahudyeth Yaum, H31:17, the day. The primary signification appears to me to that of the heat of the day. The root appears to be from the word yakam, H31:79, meaning to be hot. So a day is when there's light outside and there's heat, which is why a day is 12 hours. And again, for those who don't know, I would implore you to watch What is Morning, What is Evening video. It describes the parameters of day. Also, I also talk about day in understanding Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. And I go through how days were counted and how days were separate from nights and how nights were counted. All right, so we'll get to the last one here, and it's years. We'll start with Leviticus 25, 3 and 4. 6 years you shall sow your field. 6 years you shall prune your vineyards and gather in fruit of it. But in the 7th year, In the 7th year shall be a Shabbath rest unto the land, a Shabbath for Yahuwah. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. So Yahuwah is talking about annual cycles, years, which are 12 months. He's saying in 6 of those 12-month cycles, you shall sow your field as normal, but in the 7th year, you should let the land rest and have a Shabbath, right? And not pick it and not prune or do anything. 2 Chronicles 9:30, and Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all of Yisrael 40 years. So this is talking about the reign of Solomon, and he reigned 40 annual cycles. He ruled over all of Yisrael. All right. Psalms 94, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Now this is talking about Yahuwah. That time means nothing to him essentially. Years go by and it's like nothing. It's a blink of an eye. It's like overnight. 1,000 years is like just overnight to Yahuwah. In all of these verses, it talks about the year. The word in Yehudith is Shana, H8138 through 8141, and it means to repeat. A year, a cycle of a year, to go in a circle. So I know that the Greeks tell us that time is a linear line. It is not. Time is circular. I would say more specifically in a spiral. So yes, when you look at it one way, it looks like a circle, but it's actually moving. Even though it's going round, it's winding up. Time is winding up like a spiral, kind of like DNA. But Shana means to repeat. So you repeat every month turns into every year, and it comes back to the beginning, right? You have a cycle that begins in Abib or Abyab, and it ends with the 12th month, and then it comes back around again, and the year is repeated along with the feasts. So that is years. So, as we observed in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19, the primary purpose of the moon is to rule over the night. We saw that several times in those verses. The second purpose is a sign that darkness is separated from the light. The light was cordoned off from the darkness. You saw that actually the light and darkness that took place in Genesis 1 verses 3 through 5, right? And the third purpose, primary purpose of the moon, is to give light upon the earth at night along with the stars. The moon's secondary purposes, and you can find the scripture verses, helps fruits and other produce. Deuteronomy 33:14. To rule the night and light them along with the stars. Psalms 136:9. And it divides the sea when the waves roar. Jeremiah 31:35. So these are the purposes that Yahuwah says that he created the moon for. Go back and look at Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. Take a look at that. Look at what Yahuwah says what the moon is for, and not what man say what the moon is for. Yahuwah is the creator of the sun, moon, and stars. He created everything on the earth, in the earth, under the earth, above the earth. So I would take his word as to what the purpose of the moon is for, and not man's word, who manipulate and try to change it into what he wants it to be for. So the second part of this part 4 is I wanted to talk about books outside of canonical scripture that talk about the moon's inaccuracy when it comes to calendar purposes. So I have a few quotes from a couple books that are outside of the scripture book. but are considered a part of Scripture. The first one is the book of Enoch, or Enoch, chapter 74, verses 12 through 16. And the sun and the stars bring in all the days exactly, so they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. In 3 years, there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years, 1,820 days, so that in 8 years, there are 2,912 days. For the moon alone, the days amount in 3 years 1,062 days, for in 5 years she falls 50 days behind. And in 5 years there are 1,770 days, so that for the moon in the days in 8 years amount to 2,832 days. All the days she falls behind in 8 years are 80. So you see here, I have a chart, and it talks about the cycles of the sun and the stars and the cycle of the moon and the difference. So in 3 years, as is stated in the quote above, the sun and the stars, 1,092 days. The moon does it in 1,062 days, and there's a 30 days difference. In 5 years, 1,820 days for the sun and stars, 1,770 days for the moon. There's a difference of 50 days. In 8 years, there's 2912 for the sun and stars, and the moon, there's 2832, and that's a difference of 80 days. And when you divide that in a per year basis, the moon falls behind the sun and the stars 10 days a year. All right. So every year the moon falls behind the stars, the sun and the stars, 10 days. And what that means, and I spoke about this, I can't remember the video to come to me, but I spoke about this and how there's a scale that the lunar calendar uses, and in 19 years they have to add another month like 7 times to keep up with the regular calendar. And so in the book of Enoch, which it is a part of Scripture, you have to make sure you have the Ethiopic version and not the Slavonic or the Babylonian versions, but it is a part of Scripture. It is considered a part of Scripture, even though it's not considered canonical. The only other thing I wanted to emphasize here, besides the moon falling behind the regular calendar, it says that the sun and the stars bring in the days exactly. Okay? They never falter. It says, so they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity. And that is how we count our time. Whether you like it or not, even lunar calendar proponents follow the regular calendar. Okay? We count our years in days. How many days is in a year? How many days is in a month? How long is a day? We never refer to the passage of time through night or through moon, except for the lunar calendar people. We never count that, and I want you to remember that. All right, so our next quote comes from the book of Jubilees, chapter 6, pages 65 and 66, verses 36 through 38. For there will be those who assuredly make observations of the moon. Now it disturbeth the seasons, and come in from year to year 10 days too soon. For this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day, the day of testimony, and an unclean day, a feast day. And they will confound all the days. Confound means confuse. And the holy mountain, and the holy with the unclean, and the unclean with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months and the Sabbaths and feasts, and jubilees. For they will go wrong as to the months and the Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. For this reason I command and testify to you, that you may testify to them. For after your death your children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the beginning of the months, otherwise known as new moons, and seasons, and Sabbaths, and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood and all kinds of flesh. So, in this quote here, it says again, just like Enoch said, that the year will come 10 days too soon if you use observations of the moon, meaning that the moon falls short 10 days shorter than the regular year. All right. It also says that they will go wrong as to the beginnings of months. And we talked about that in part 2, how they have said that the beginning of the month, what YHUH originally said, that you need to have, a feast at the beginning of the month, every month. They turned it into new moon. Right? So you will go wrong as to the beginnings of months and seasons and Sabbaths and festivals. Last quote also from the book of Jubilees, chapter 2, verses 8 through 10. And on the 4th day he created the sun and the moon and the stars, and set them in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon all the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and divide the light from the darkness. And God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth, for days, and for Sabbaths, and for months, and for feasts, and for years, and for Sabbaths of years, and for jubilees, and for all seasons of the years. It divideth the light from the darkness, and for prosperity, that things may prosper which shoot and grow on the earth. These 3 kinds he made on the 4th day. Now this quote is telling you exactly what I have been saying through the 4 parts of this series. It's saying that you use the sun and the stars to count days and months and years and Shabbats and Sabbaths of years and jubilees, and for all the seasons of the year. Again, seasons are appointed times. This is what you use the sun and the stars for. You don't use the moon for these things. All right. So, this is the culmination of the 4-part series of examining the moon. Throughout this series, I have showed you how definitions for Kadash and Yurak, Kadash meaning month, Yurak meaning moon, were both changed to have a synonymous meaning that they could interchange and use one for another. I showed several examples where they used the word Kadash and they changed it to new moon. They added moon to the definition of new. All right, and I showed one example. I believe that was in 1 Chronicles 6:38, where they used moon and changed that definition for month. That was in part 3. And they changed it in the concordances and lexicons so that they could do, interchange one for another, and it's to cause confusion. Also, throughout this series, I showed how in only scripture verses pertaining to feasts and Shabbos, that the word for month, Kadash, was changed to mean moon, Yurak. But for verses that didn't mention feasts or Shabbos, the same word was translated correctly as in month. And I showed an example of that. I also showed how in both Psalms 81:3 and Psalm 104:19, misinterpretations were made to benefit moon observance. We talked about how the word for appoint was not even the definition. The word asha was for work, right? I believe that was in Psalms 104. Psalms 83, we talked about the word kasa and how the Syriac definition was used instead of the YHUHderek or Hebrew definition was used. And they were both manipulated to mean moon. In the case of Psalms 81, it was the full moon. In the case of Psalms 104, it was meant to appoint for feasts, which that's not what it said. Also, I showed how pervasive moon worship was in ancient times to the point where feasts were declared for the moon in the 8th month in both kingdoms of Yehuda and Yasharel. And Yahuwah has no feast in the 8th month. He never stipulated any feast for the 8th month. All of the feasts, Yahuwah's feasts, culminate in the 7th month. All right, and I showed how they were both, that both those same false deities that were celebrated in both the kingdom of Yasharel and the kingdom of Yahuwah traced back to Baal, right? The moon worship, and how there was a temple in Syria, and I even talked about how King Solomon was best friends with King Hiram, who was the king of Syria at that time, or the king of he was the king of Syria, and how they were best friends, and that's most likely how national idol worship began, and that's how the influence was done also through Shaluma's wives, because he, in his old age, he made idols and places of worship for false idols. Lastly, I showed that moon worship continues today in the monthly practice of the sanctification of the moon ceremony, where magical phrases were used to bring the moon back to its fullest light. All right. Also, this video series purpose was to show the various manipulations done to scripture, lexicons, and concordances to point towards moon worship. Yahuwah doesn't make any references to the moon when it comes to his feast and Shabbats. Please see chapters Deuteronomy 16, Exodus 12, chapter 12, chapter 23, and chapter 34, Leviticus chapter 23, and Numbers chapters 28 and 29. This tradition of men is a strong one. And if you can't discern the truth presented here, or you still feel confusion about this subject, I implore you to pray to Yahuwah and ask him through his Ruach HaKodesh to please help you get the truth. This has been a very strong stumbling block for the believers of Yahuwah and his scripture. And it's been propagated by men throughout time, but it's also been propelled by evil spirits, demons who continue on with this false belief. They want you to worship someone other than Yahuwah, and that's all there is to it. Yahuwah makes it very, very clear that worshiping the moon is not what he wants. And the 3 quotes that I have done throughout this series, you can take a look at them. Deuteronomy 4, 15 through 19, Jeremiah 8, verses 1 and 2, and Deuteronomy 17, 2 through 5. And I want you to remember this also. In every verse that claims it's new moon, there is only one word present in YHUHderek, and that is Kadash. If you look at the scripture in Hebrew, because most of you don't know what YHUHderek is, if you look at those scriptures in Hebrew, you will only find one word, Kadash. Kadash means new, renew, or month. That's it. If that verse truly said new moon, there would be two words, and it would say Yarak Kadash, meaning moon new, but it doesn't. And I advise you to look at these verses here in this white box, and I want you to remember this most of all. If you don't remember the concordances, if you don't remember the two psalms that are used to propagate lunar moon and how they were mistranslated, if you don't remember any of the verses where it says beginning of the months and have been changed to new moon, if you don't remember any of that, remember this. There should be two words in the verses. Every verse that says new moon, there should be two words and not just Kadash. It should say Yarak Kadash. And if it doesn't say Yarak Kadash, it does not mean new moon. Kadash means new, renew, or month. All right. So I just want to thank you, everyone, for being patient, for going through this series with me. Here are the source and the resources that I use to compile part 4. We will get into, I pretty much went over Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19, but we will continue that. And I pray that Yahuwah helps you see the clarity and see his truth. Not my truth, not anybody else's truth, but Yahuwah's truth. I thank you so very much. Please donate. We could really use your help if you're moved to do so. And I just want to thank you again. And I ask that Yahuwah watches over you and your family. I pray that he gives you shalom in everything you do, and that he prospers all of the work of your hands, and that you are protected by him. Thank you, and have a good night, evening, or morning. Shalom.